Welcome to Harder Than It Looks, Parking Uncovered, a podcast that illuminates real solutions to common problems within the parking industry. I'm your host, Brian Wolff, CEO of Parker Technology. In each episode, I'll introduce you to real parking pros that will bring their own tips, tricks, and best practices to manage what we all know is harder than it looks, parking a car. Okay, on the show today is Rick Serra. So Rick is currently a vice president at Premium Parking. However, he was much more famous for being a co-founder of Allpro Parking. Rick was born and raised in Boston, Massachusetts, studied radio broadcasting, however, started his parking career journey after graduation over 50 years ago. He started working with Allright Parking in Philly, Boston, Atlantic City, Buffalo, just like a classic parking guy. He was all over the place before Allright was sold to Central Parking. And then, as I mentioned, he started his own company a year later, Allpro Parking, in 2000 with partners from a real estate company. Rick is married to his lovely bride, Diane, and they have 4 kids, Rick Jr., Veronica, Gina, and Dante, along with 4 grandkids, Juliana, Nico, Isabella, and Sophia. I love those names. It was recently on this podcast that I said, and I'll repeat this for emphasis, it was always intrigued me that the people who could go on forever about their accomplishments send me the shortest bios. I believe that's a true testament to their humility. And I have to tell you all, I have a very soft spot for Rick and his partner, Craig Barber, because they were one of the very first companies that made me feel welcome and that I felt and made me feel like I belonged in parking nearly 9 years ago. So thank you, Rick, for that. And welcome to Harder Than It Looks.
Oh, thank you, Brian. I appreciate it. Thank you for having me. I'm looking forward to talking with you today.
Yeah, this is going to be a lot of fun. And I structured the questions to sort of begin to sort of pick your brain and unravel 50 years of parking wisdom, because I know you won't brag about it, but I'll see if I can spend the next 40 or 45 minutes or so teasing it out of you, as it were.
Good luck, because I can't remember what I had for lunch yesterday. You want me to remember back 50 years?
Well, I won't make you go back 50, although I will make you go back 50 years now, because if you've listened to any of the podcasts and anybody that's listened to this podcast knows that one of the things that I like to do right off the bat is hand the mic to you and ask you to go back as far as you want to go. And it has to include, by the way, graduating in radio broadcasting and then ending up in parking. So you need to start there at least, and then sort of take us through your 50-year journey up to the point where we are now. I have to hear the story about how you thought you were going to be a radio broadcaster and you turned into a parking guy, because I'll bet that's a story.
Well, I guess so. When I was in high school, I just loved listening to the radio all the time and would say, wow, wouldn't that be so cool to be on the radio and being a DJ and playing your favorite music and enjoying it. So I went to a school in Boston. As you said, I'm from Boston. So it was a junior college that had a broadcasting course. It was Graham Junior College, located in Kenmore Square, right outside of downtown Boston. And it was interesting. In my courses, I also had a little bit of TV production, radio broadcasting production, behind the scenes, sales. And they gave us the whole gamut of what it is to be in radio or TV. So it was a 2-year school as a junior college. It was great. They pull us all into a room in the auditorium to tell us about what life's going to be like now that we're graduating. So they informed the whole class that it's going to be a challenge. There's not that many jobs out there. It's going to be tough for you to get a job in radio or TV. But, if you're a woman, you've got a very good chance of getting a good job. Or if you are Black, you'll also have a very good chance of getting a job. So I look at myself and say, well, I don't meet either one of those qualifications, so I'm screwed. But let me back up a year, or at the beginning of my second year of taking the courses, I went out and got a part-time job. I said, I can't keep on living off of mom and dad, and to get some cash flow going here. So I got a part-time job for Allright Parking, and put me on a parking lot right in downtown Boston. So I'd go there and I would relieve the day attendant. So it was like 4:30, 5 o'clock in the evening. I would take over that parking lot. It was the federal lot that for the rest of the day. So what I'm doing is checking everybody out, all the workers coming out of the office buildings all around. I had to have to move some cars to get theirs, take their money, whatever was necessary to get them on their way. So that was the introduction to parking. I was working part-time for Allright Parking downtown.
And so we talked to somebody yesterday, and I won't name it because it could be out of sequence, but we talked to someone else in parking yesterday that said they answered an ad in the newspaper. So how did you get the job with Allright?
Exactly that way. I was looking through the local paper and help wanted ads, and I saw that I think I can be a parking attendant. I hesitate to tell you what my starting wage was back then, but I guess I can. I believe it was $2.35 per hour. That shows you how old I am.
Well, what's funny is I'm a couple years behind you, but I think my first job, I made like $4.25 an hour. And so, inflation, double. Yeah. Okay. So you were on the lot from 5 to what time?
9 o'clock at night.
Okay.
Yeah. 4.5 hours.
Okay. And were there coming and going? So the workers were leaving, but also people coming in. So for nightlife or whatever have you?
I was the only attendant on the lot, and it was great because it had 2 entrances on the north and south driveways. So you had to constantly be looking at all driveways because cars would pull in and just pull into a space, and you had to run down and take care of it.
And my guess is it was a cigar box. My other guess is it was cash. And so for a very good chunk of your time, so with Allright, how long were you with Allright total before Central bought them?
Geez, 25, 26 years.
Oh, okay. A long time. So I would imagine one of the biggest tricks of the trade as you worked your way up to Allright was to seek out and or to find or to uncover all of your silent partners in the cash game of parking. Was that fair? In other words, Scott Gould tells me all the time that he had silent partners who were stealing from you. And so I would imagine one of the jobs was to tick and tie and figure out who was absconding some of the money that
that was always part of it too, because my first manager was probably the most guiltiest I came across, and that's how I got a chance to move up the ladder with Allright. I ended up doing his job. He liked to spend the night in the bar instead of managing me and the other lots throughout the night. So he would constantly give me responsibility.
Yeah.
Well, can you go up to the next lot a block away and close him out at the end of the day, get his money, put it into the night drop? So
yeah,
that was my first experience on someone not being totally dedicated and loyal and who knows what he was doing other than that. That wasn't my purview then. But yeah, right. I mean, for the fact that it's a cash business, you're always concerned about who's taking the money out of the till.
Yeah.
And then back then it was so easy. You're giving a ticket to the customer, and it would be easy enough not to give a customer a ticket or give them a bad ticket that's not being inventoried.
Yeah.
And going into the system.
Yeah. Any good stories about anybody that was particularly clever or sinister around their plots to lighten the load, as it were?
Well, let me see. I would say the most interesting part of that was when I was in Philadelphia. I worked at the Philadelphia airport, and they had a state-of-the-art computerized system in the cashier booths. And it was supposed to be stale-proof. And it was so funny that our management team said, okay, let's go work the booth for a couple hours. We all take a different booth and work at stealing. Try to figure out how can cashiers beat the system. Well, and at an airport, cars would stay 3 days, 5 days, 2 weeks. So their tally would total up to a nice bit of money. And it was amazing that we still found so many employees figuring out how to beat the system. But it was mostly customers that would try to beat the system. That was the fun part. Customers would try to get a ticket out of the ticket splitter now after returning back from their trip from 2 weeks and then leave with that ticket that's only 20 minutes old. And that was the fun part, trying to chase down customers that were trying to steal. And I think how the employees were doing it too. Somehow they were getting tickets that they would be able to put in for someone's $100 tab, they would put in a $5 ticket.
Yep. Then got sold to Central. It sounds like you lasted a year at Central. You don't strike me as a Central kind of guy. And I mean, that is no disrespect to any of the Central people that I know, but we all know who they are. And so you got the idea to start your own business. Tell me about that.
Well, let me work it up a little bit too, because working for Allright Parking, we were a totally different breed than the culture of Central Parking. Allright Parking was out of Houston, Texas. Well, we were always referred to as the good old boy company, and truly what was great about Allright and the management team there was that they entrusted their city managers, the general managers in the city, they entrusted them to do the best job they can and gave them empowerment, and they respected us, which was really, really great. So that was the difficult with the change in culture from Allright to Central. Central had everything under their thumb. You couldn't, breathe without asking permission. So it was a totally different culture. And it was so funny that I was probably 8-9 months into it. And a good friend of mine, Paul Simonelli, who ended up being my partner in Allpro Parking, we used to always go out dinner, with our wives and all. We were friends. So we always hung out together. And after a while, he was saying, "Rick, what the hell's going on with you? You look like shit." I said, "This company's killing me. I can't stand it. There, day and night. I'm on the computer all the time. I'm not having fun. It's not parking cars anymore." So after a while, and then he got back to me again and says, "Well, why don't you start your own company?" I said, I don't know. I don't think I'm ready to do something like that." I said, "Yes, you are. You got me. We'll be partners." So the light bulb went on. And I said, "Geez, maybe there is an opportunity here."
Yeah.
And that's how it all started. Paul, who was his company, Simonelli Real Estate Corporation.
Yeah.
He is a developer and a real estate broker. They own properties. They manage buildings. It's a huge company. They're in many states themselves now. So it was April 1st of 2000, Pro Parking.
That's awesome.
Okay, well, Craig and I were co-managers when I first moved to Buffalo back in 1984. Allright Parking had bought multiple parking services, and that's the company that Craig was working for. And they brought me in as the Allright person to, change everything to the Allright ways. So we were sort of co-managers, where he had the feet on the ground type of thing and the relationships, and then I just had to bring in the culture, the corporate structure. So we worked well. We were good friends, so we always worked together. And then eventually when I started my own company, he was still with Central Parking, living in DC, working in the DC market at that point. And we always stayed in touch. And I told him one of these days I'm going to try to reel you in. It was probably about 3 years into Allpro's existence that I went to him and said, "Are you ready yet? I need you. I need you to join me. I need your expertise, and we'll make you a partner." So he finally did it.
That's great.
I think it was the summer of 2003. We were about 3.5 years old at that point, or almost 3.5 years old. And he joined my team.
Craig is good people. I know he built a great reputation within the parking industry, and you guys did seem to get on pretty well. And then Paul, behind the scenes, I remember you saying his name several times, but real estate and parking go together like peas and carrots. It sounds like it was probably a good partnership for sure.
Yeah, it definitely was. So Paul was being in real estate too. I had a lot of connections. The first 4 parking lots were parking lots that Simonelli was leasing to Central Parking. So one by one, he was canceling leases and handing them over to me, so we could take them in-house, so to speak. And Craig was still back there at that point, and he's looking at this happening. He's shaking his head. He's like, "Well, not much I can do." They cancel a lease. They got the right to cancel it.
Yeah. Well, so I guess one of the points that I wanted to make, got young parking entrepreneurs on the podcast, sometimes you just need somebody to give you a nudge, right? And say, I'll jump in together, and I may not want to do it on my own, but if I've got people that I trust and people that I've worked with before, then maybe they'd give you an opportunity to take a leap.
Absolutely. And that's the whole point of that too, because Paul and I were friends, so I trusted him. He gave me his entire real estate team at my beck and call. I mean, I worked very closely with them. I got to utilize their expertise in their departments. So HR, accounting, and everything was being done through established departments through them as we built our own. We didn't use their departments, but we used their leaders of the departments to help us establish our own. And yes, you got to have faith in people. You got to trust people. I had a lot of faith and trust in Paul and his team. I worked with some great people to get the company going, and fun experience, but can't be afraid to take a leap.
Right. Every once in a while, my guess is you had relatively young kids, maybe not. Maybe your kids, it's probably teenagers at the time.
Yeah, no, my kids were just very young.
I'm trying to do math in my head. That doesn't work very well usually.
Yeah, it was in the year 2000. So yeah, they were teenagers.
Yeah, that's good. So now you're probably at a point in your career, you got a 50-year parking career. Could you distill it into, like, what was the recipe for success? Like, if you look back, you say, okay, it was these three things that really drove the success of Rick Serra, but Allpro, and even probably back to the Allright days, I would think.
Yeah. Well, I contribute a lot of the company's success. My success was the fact that I learned how to be hands-on. And I got to give Allright Parking that credit, because that's the training. They trained us to do everything, and one of the things we never got away from is don't hesitate to continue parking cars. You still got to get out on the street, and got to get into the lots and facilities and work with your team. And that's what I did when I became owner of Allpro. I mean, the first parking lot, I was there all day long myself. I was the only employee we had at one point. Started gathering. First step was an office person, and then started hiring attendants. So this way I can start working the system and getting more locations.
Right. Building scales. How about, you'd mentioned sort of the cultures and the culture of the business. How would you characterize the culture of Allpro?
Well, I copied what I had learned at Allright Parking. You have to treat your employees well. You have to make sure that they're happy and they aren't afraid of doing a little hard work, because it's very demanding. You got to put in long hours, long days, and you got to be able to do anything and everything. So we did that. But one of the things, for the fact that too, I was part of a real estate company, was your curb appeal. You had to have your property looking well-maintained, very attractive, adding landscaping. So that was one of the first things we did with all the parking lots. Then once we took them over, is we gave them a good, pristine look. It's got people's attention.
Yeah.
So it's important to be proud of what you have, what you're offering.
Yeah, and take good care of it, right? I think I have written columns, I have talked to others. You are sending a signal to your parking customer, the experience they're going to get by the way the property looks, right? The way it looks and feels, whether it's lit, whether it's clean, all of those things are sending signals. And the opposite is true as well, right? Dim lights, a dark garage, dirty. Those folks know what they're in for when they park there. So curb appeal for sure.
Absolutely.
Just being there to deliver service to the customers as well.
Mm-hmm.
So how long have you been parking cars does the Bills have a name for the stadium? I should know that.
The name of this stadium is Highmark Stadium.
Okay. So how long have you been parking cars there?
Well, since I moved to Buffalo, it was 1984. So right away, back then, it was multiple parking. Allright Parking was managing the stadium. I believe it was Ralph Wilson Stadium back then. That fall and winter, I was learning how to operate the stadium back then.
So pick your favorite story, whether it's you got 6 feet of snow the night before, or I can't even imagine. Just pick a story. Tell us a story about parking cars at Ralph Wilson and or Highmark Stadium.
Well, as everybody likes to point out, that Buffalo is the most challenging place during winter. We had a lot of snow. So I think there was one game that it was light snow, but it was frigid. And this is probably back in the 90s. We literally had to have our people sit in their car to operate the parking lot because they couldn't be outside. It was, the chill factor was like 10 below. and you couldn't stay warm enough. So our collectors are at the driveways in their car and stick their hand out the window to stop the car to get money and from the folks coming into the parking lot.
Yeah.
But that game went on. They played the full game in that cold.
Yeah. I don't know how they do that. Green Bay, Buffalo. Yeah. I have this image in my head of 6 feet of snow in Buffalo, you needing to plow lots, or I'm guessing that was your responsibility to clear the lots, was it not?
Yeah, it was in a downtown location, not at the stadium.
Okay.
They brought in big earth movers to get the snow plowed. And they always do a great job. They'll spend days clearing snow and piling it up, and then they'll take the pile and move it off site. It's important, A parking space is income. You can't lose
Yes.
your income. And mostly with the Bills, they don't want to not have space for a handful of season ticket holders and their fans that there's no
Right.
place to park.
Yep. Yeah. It's revenue and it's convenience, right? I mean, your ability to put a car in a space so then go to the game is pretty important. Okay. So now we'll fast forward a couple of years ago. I think, was it 2 years ago that Allpro transitioned to premium parking? Tell us about that process and tell us about your decisions around, I'm sure you had choices. And so what drove your choices and how did you decide when the right time was and then who the right partner was to actually do the transaction?
Sure. Yeah. It was September 1st, 2022, when we sold it to premium parking. But a few years prior, we realized that it was possibly time to sell. And I say we loosely because I was really not one of the three partners that was interested in selling. It was my livelihood. It was my way of existing. So I wanted to continue us the same way we were operating. But Paul and Craig was just about retiring at that point and said, I guess it's worth it to test the waters. And Paul, being in real estate, he wanted the capital to advance more of his investments in buildings and properties that he's responsible for. So we actually went on the market and we were vetted by a couple of different companies and we were vetting them too. But it was one company we decided on back then and we were doing our due diligence with them. I'd rather not mention their name.
Sure.
Yeah, we spent 6-7 months going back and forth, doing the work we needed to do. And all of a sudden it fell apart. It was probably around 2019, they decided to back out of the opportunity. So we continued on. I just kept on improving the company in any way we can, making it more of an attractive company. That's what you got to do to prepare.
Yep.
And then late 21, early 22, we decided to test the waters again. And we ended up getting a few offers. And it was Premium that had the best offer. And it was the company that I liked the best out of what I was vetting, because I was still interested in staying on.
Yep.
And the biggest important part of it was, well, naturally, the money's had to be right, so everybody could feel good about cashing out. But I wanted to make sure that the culture was very similar and that the staff was protected, that there was an opportunity for the staff to move on, stay on, and grow. And that was the best part about the transition with Premium. We didn't lose any employees.
Yeah.
They brought everybody on. Everybody had an opportunity, and so many of them now have advanced into better positions.
Yeah, that's great. Well, I can imagine, it was your baby for a long time and you've built awesome relationships with the people that you worked with and you want to protect them is probably a good word, but you want to just make sure that whoever you're handing your baby to, that they're going to take good care of your baby. And of course, everybody's got to make business decisions, but there's business decisions and then there's, other decisions, right? So
Right.
You strike me as a guy who wanted to make sure that his people were well taken care of and that there was a good transition. Ben Montgomery, and obviously there are others that I don't know as well, but I can see where the cultures certainly mesh. Ben seems like a good guy and laid back and does things for the right reasons and all of that. So congratulations on that transaction. And
yeah, Ben's great to work with. And the owner of the company, Jim Yuji, he's really a good guy, very generous. And, it's been great to work with him. I worked more with Ben since he was the president and it was more day-to-day activity with him and the rest of his team. So it was the right decision, and it's been a good move for the past 2 years.
That's great. Well, again, congratulations. So now I'm going to transition to something maybe a little bit more fun, probably just as near and dear to your heart. I've got to hear the story of this Corvette of yours. Rick and I have tried for 3 or 4 years, maybe longer, to put together a trip or an Indianapolis for him. And it was going to involve him driving his Corvette from Buffalo to Indianapolis. And then life just inevitably got in the way every time. So tell us about the Corvette and what it is, how long you've owned it, why it's special, all of those things.
Well, I still intend to get out there because I keep on promising my wife, I'm going to show her Indy. You're going to love it. We'll hang out with Brian and his folks. And that's what I was hoping to do this in person with you, this trip. But like you said, too many things got in the way this week and I couldn't make the trip. And it would have been a beautiful week too, because it's about time you got to store these things away because,
Yes.
Here in Buffalo, once November 1st you don't want to have it on the road. So, well, it was back in 2016. It belonged to a business group. It's called Vistage. And it's a worldwide organization of, I guess it's a peer-to-peer group. I was in the CE group that I belonged to. And we were at a meeting one time and we're just chatting. And one of the questions came up, said, geez, if you could own any car of your choice, what would it be? What was always your dream car? And I didn't give it much thought. I said, I just would like a nice luxury car at first. And then I said, wait a minute. When I was like 19, 20 years old, I fell in love with the Corvette. And I said, geez, that's what I would do. I would go after and get myself a Corvette. When I was 19, 20, I was almost 60 when I bought it, I should say.
Yeah.
And I just life, got busy working, weren't focused on sports cars, and then got married, kids, and a Corvette doesn't work well with raising a family.
Yep.
No. Figure out where to put the car seat.
Yep. Not a very big back seat, the Corvette.
So I spent a year looking on the market. I was interested in older style ones at first, and then finally I said, no, I think I want a newer one. My lease was coming up in the car I had, so my auto dealer called me, the guy that I always dealt with, the owner of the dealership. He says, your lease is coming up. I can put you into a nice new Buick LaCrosse. That's what I had at the time. I said, well, Jim, I'll tell you what I want to do. I want to buy a Corvette. I don't want to lease a car anymore. I want to buy a Corvette Stingray. So I can help you with that. Even though he wasn't a Chevy dealer, but his group of dealerships, they had a Chevy dealership in the family. So he searched, and out of Fredonia, which is about 40 miles away from Buffalo, they brought in a Corvette for me to his dealership. And I told him exactly what color I wanted, the style I wanted, and he brought this, and here's the car I got for you. And it was even better than I was looking for because it had the black rims, which made it pop. So I said, okay, sold. I didn't even take it for a test drive. I said, I want it.
That's awesome.
And that was in 2017.
My version of the Corvette story is in 1989, I dated a woman whose father was an attorney, and he had so this was 89, but he would have had like a 1988 Corvette, and he allowed me to drive it. We would drive it around. She was in Milwaukee. That car drove like a Corvette. It was a bit of a lumber wagon. Then he got T-boned by somebody and got out alive. They T-boned him on the driver's side, and he came out alive, unscathed.
Jeez.
So it went from, this was 88, and I think the new car was like a 93, 94 Corvette. And the difference between those two cars was like night and day from a comfort perspective. They had done something with the suspension and all of that. And so all of that is to say, I've got an uncle who owns 10 Corvettes, and he would never buy a new style Corvette. He's like, no, I only want the old style. And I was like, Uncle Kurt, you have got to get yourself a new Corvette or a newer Corvette after whatever year this was, 92, 93, whatever it was, because it was so dramatic. Sure enough, and this was probably in the 2000s at that point, but sure enough, he got a newer Corvette, and he was like, that makes a big difference. Like, those cars are now like comfortable as opposed to, the early style Corvettes. You knew you were in a sports car riding a foot off the ground.
Yeah. The seat, you felt like you were on the ground when you were sitting in cars before, but that's just it too. My wife and I have done many trips, and that's why I wasn't afraid of a 8-9 hour drive to Indy in the car, because it's comfortable. I gotta admit, it's a challenge to get in and out of it right now. But once I'm in it, I can sit I can sit in it for hours and just go, and
Yep.
it can go. That's what's so great about it. The speed, the technology, and the newer versions. I can't believe this is already 7 years old. I've had this car for 7 years now, and
Might be time for a new Corvette.
oh,
Or maybe something Porsche or Jaguar or something else. You could go up market.
well, the Ferrari is what. It's funny that I got a buddy that's got a Corvette, and we always do weekend rides with our wives, and we'll go someplace. And he says, I think it might be time to advance from the Corvette. And he's talking Ferrari. He says, you got to go look at some Ferraris. Could happen.
Boys and their toys.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Well, listen.
So what I should do too is send you a picture because I designed the car. The car is blue.
Okay.
Admiral Blue, it's called. And I put a design on the back of the car on the side, which used to be the Allpro logo. So it's sort of like two roads in a swoosh. So I had it go right around the rim of the wheel.
Nice.
And then I also had a custom plate, Allpro P.
Nice.
I'll share that with you.
Yeah, no, that's good. See, I knew we could have a good chat about the Corvette for sure. All right. So if you had to sum up your 50-year career in parking, how would you sum it up?
No regrets. I love parking. I love the people. I mean, I think I have made so many friends and relationships. And again, that's one of the things I should have said is key. You got to have relationships. You got to make sure you got good relationships in the business, that people like yourself, that once we started working, we became friends. And that was what I love most about it, is everybody around me. And I still want to continue, even though I'm retiring, and I'm going to still attend some of the major events that I can, just to stay in touch with the people that I got to know over the years.
Relationships matter, and you've been a big part of it. Like I said in the intro, I've got a big soft spot for you because you were one of the first people that sort of welcomed me in and at least didn't hold my newness against me, which I definitely always appreciated.
Well, how could I? I mean, I'm grateful for you because you introduced me to Blanton's Bourbon. The one time trip you came up to Buffalo, we went out for drinks and dinner and drinks. I think they had a bottle of Blanton's at the bar, and we killed that one and opened up another one. 4 of us.
Boy, if there's bourbon around and gambling, you could probably, I won't be far. That's good. All right. Well, then now let's go ahead and move on. I've got 6 questions that I ask every guest. And so I call it the lightning round, but of course, I'm going to give you all the time you need to give me your best answer. So the first one is, what phrase are you known for? So if someone utters a phrase in the Premium Now office or the Allpro office, they know immediately that that phrase originated at Rick Serra's desk. What would it be?
Oh, boy. Well, maybe the one I always come to mind is, it is what it is. So live with it and work.
Yeah. Well, they say that a leader's number one job is to discover reality and deal with it. So that would be apropos for you to say it is what it is. We got to figure out what to do now.
Right. Exactly.
That's good. Okay. So next question is, what's the hardest thing you've ever done in life? Not necessarily parking. We'll get to that. But what's the hardest thing you've ever done in life?
I've ever done. I don't think anything was really hard.
Right?
There's always challenges, and you overcome them. But I can't say anything was too hard or not. I mean, it is what it is. I accepted it and went on it. But I think I've been in life. Probably now. Retiring. It's a lot easy.
That's an honest answer for sure.
Yeah. But I'm getting used to it.
Yeah. Well, and I do lurk a little bit on Facebook, so I can see you traveling around the world, and I can see that your kids and your grandkids are with you.
But yeah, absolutely. That's what the best part about it is. Now my wife is looking to sell her business. She's got a bakery. So she's looking to sell because she doesn't want me to be retired all by myself. Because we just, as you saw, we were in Italy for 3 weeks, which was a great trip. But we want to be close to the grandchildren. We've got 4 grandchildren and the 5th one on it.
Congratulations.
We're getting a granddaughter up in Boston in December. So we plan on being in Boston from
That's great. Okay. All right. So now what's the hardest thing you've ever done in parking?
probably. It was hard. It was fun, but it was starting my own company. To take that leap, it was difficult to leave the comfort and the safety of a big corporation and salaries coming in, the benefits are there and all. And then all of a sudden I'm walking out and I've got nothing and I've got to now build something, So, it was hard, but it was easy.
Yeah, you had the instinct for it. You built relationships and it was what it was. You just
Yeah.
got after it.
And I guess it was probably the fear of the unknown, when I do this.
Yep. So now if next question is, if you could wave your magic wand and fix anything in parking, what would it be?
Probably just to have most customers realize we're there for their benefit. A lot of people don't like the challenges we give them, whether it's the automation that they struggle with or the service side of it, because we got less and less hands-on service ambassadors because it's automated. So I guess it would be that everybody would understand it is for their benefit to make life easier for them.
Yeah, you're trying to meet them where they are, right?
Yeah.
And I think one of the hardest things about parking, especially in cities, is you've got to serve such a broad spectrum of customers. So I'm sure there are still some people show up with cash, think that they can pay cash. And then you've got, kids like mine that grew up with cell phones or with smartphones, and they're like, why do I don't have any cash, or I don't even have credit cards. I just use Apple Pay or whatever it is. So it's a challenge. Okay, so we talked a little bit about this, but maybe you've got a different answer now in retirement. When you're not parking cars, what do you do for fun?
Well, my fun right now is renovating our property here at home. Yeah,
Okay.
I've got a double that we live in, a 2-family home, and we've been renovating the upstairs so we can get ready for it to rent out as an Airbnb.
Okay.
I'm tinkering up there, doing the last bit. I mean, it's 95% there, and a contractor did the heavy load, but now I'm doing the little finishing touches here and there, and also the yard and the property. I just built a planter box between my property and my neighbor's property, so this way we could use it for gardening. Start growing some fresh tomatoes and whatever else we want to put in there.
Yeah.
And now I got to put a fence on each side of the planter box. So it's using my hands, tinkering around the house and improving what it looks like.
Curb appeal, right?
Yeah.
Trying to get some curb appeal driven in. And I did notice that about some of the notes you gave us earlier, that you said that you liked landscaping and you love to tinker and do home improvement. So it sounds like all of that's right up your alley.
Yeah, I always like to talk about curb appeal. Every spring I get out there and I make sure the front of the house has plenty of bright, colorful flowers and a lot of lights and everything. So
yeah, that's great. Okay, so coming around the bend, last question, and you can have a couple answers for this if you'd like, but what are you most proud of?
Well, my biggest pride is my family. I've got such great kids. I've got 4 kids, 2 boys and 2 girls, and I couldn't be more proud of each one of them. They're all very successful. My 2 girls are married and giving us grandchildren.
Yeah.
And my son, the best there are. Both my sons are hard workers, dedicated. I mean, it's in our blood. My wife and I are always hard workers, and it led down to our children.
Yeah.
Well, I'm very proud of every one of them.
So that's your family. That's usually a given.
Yeah.
Anything else?
I am proud of the company that I created. Allpro Parking had, and it still has, a great reputation in the markets we are, especially in Buffalo. People still call me. Hey, Rick, parking question. I got a parking need. What can you do? How can you help us? And I love that. I'm proud to be able to say, yeah, we can do that. I'll help you out, whatever I can do.
Yeah, that's great. Okay. Those are 2 great things to be proud of for sure. And I want to say thank you for your friendship and for your business and for welcoming me into parking, even though I was wet behind the ears. It's been a great ride. And we are going to get you to Indianapolis. You could sign up all of your folks to come over to Fusion 25, our user conference in May. Plant a seed. might be something for you to think about. And it's very close to the Indianapolis 500. I think it's the weekend afterwards. So maybe we can kill two birds with one stone.
I wasn't in the 500 this year. A buddy of mine needed someone to go with him, and he asked me, and I went, and it was fabulous.
So the Fusion 25 is the weekend after the Indianapolis 500. It'll be a great time to play golf. So you came to the Indianapolis 500, so you saw it. Full disclosure, I've lived in Indianapolis 22 years. I've only been to the race one time. I've been to the track lots of times, but I've only been to the race one time. And what I could tell you, the thing that impressed me the most, or that impressed upon me the most, is how narrow that front straight is and how they get three cars through there at 200 miles an hour. I have no idea how they don't crash every single time.
I was amazed at the volume of people.
Yeah.
What is it? 300 to 400,000 people that are attending something like that. I mean, I'm used to a football game with 70, 80,000 is the highest I've ever seen. It wasn't a bucket list, but I added it to my bucket list, and now I got it checked off.
Yeah, that's awesome. It is the greatest spectacle in racing for sure.
It is.
And we're famous for it. So, okay, Rick, well, thank you very much for your time, for your friendship. And I look forward to seeing you at future conferences, because I can tell you're not going to fade away. You're just going to sort of tiptoe your way out of parking while you fill your calendar up with other things. So thank you for that.
Thanks, Brian. Thank you. And I appreciate all the service you gave us over the years. I definitely value our friendship and want that to continue.
That's great. And that's a wrap on this episode of Harder Than It Looks, Parking Uncovered. If you enjoyed this episode and you'd like to keep listening, subscribe to the podcast on your favorite platform, Apple, Spotify, or YouTube. We'd also appreciate if you left a review and let us know how we did. Thank you again for listening. I'll see you in 2 weeks, where you'll meet another expert and we'll give you a different perspective, plus new hope that you're not the only one with a job that's harder than it looks. This is Brian Wolff signing off. Bye for now.